And so this is a massive incursion on humanity.
I really started it as a joke.
It's really easy when you know nothing.
I'm Richard Gearhart.
And I'm Elizabeth Gearhart. You just heard some snippets from our show. Are you thinking of starting a new business? Stay tuned. And now it is time to find out how Gary Cohen took a $4,000 a year startup into a NASDAQ listed company. Welcome, Gary. Please spill the beans.
Spill the beans. Well, it's really easy when you know nothing. My business partner, Rick Diamond, and I started with, each of us put in $2,000, and the idea came to us. My roommate asked me to spy on his competitors at a trade show in New York because I was vacationing there. And I'm like, okay, I wasn't doing anything. I was out of school. And so I spent a day walking around this trade show, and he was selling the first computer systems. They were called predictive dialers, which predicts when a person's going to be free on the line so that the productivity of that caller who's placing the call is double, right? So huge innovation in the call center industry. And so by the end of the day, I had made up this story about, I'm going to the call center business. And I'm like, I sold myself. And I called a childhood friend. He and I had been talking about going into real estate or something. And I said, I think I have a better idea for us. And he goes, well, okay, we don't know anything about real estate. We don't know anything about call centers. So that was the launch. Literally just made up in the air one day. And then we started using my roommate's technology, telephony. And we knew nothing about the industry, and there were competitors out there, but they knew nothing about the technology. So that gave us such leverage on them that places like Dun & Bradstreet and IBM signed up with us just because they didn't understand how we could be so productive and so not knowing about what we were doing. And eventually United Healthcare hired us because we didn't know what we were doing, because they had a hiring freeze on. And they said, we're going to use you, and we're going to use you because you have no bad habits in this call center business. And at the time it was telemarketing, right? And we're going, yep, that's true. We have no, bad habits because nobody trained us. We're going to train you to do it well. And we were insourced, and we hired people, brought them over to their offices, and they taught us how to do it. And it was one step after another. And as we grew, we needed money, and we didn't have any. So we went to the government for money. How do you do that? We had jobs, lots of jobs. And so the first town offered us, I don't know, $250,000. And we did the deal. And then the next town, we got a little smarter. And then it was $1 million to open up a call center. But this was the trick. I just thought it was funny. We started getting frustrated that we get this money from the government through economic development, and we'd have to pay taxes on it, which seems so insane. The government's giving you money, and then they
well,
tax
it's like
you
taxes
on it, right?
on Social Security payments, right?
Yes, it just makes no sense. So we started getting clever, which was we had them lease back everything we needed. So we'd have them buy the computers, and we'd lease it for pretty much $1 a year until 5 years goes up, and then we buy for $1 back from them. So the community would actually hold the assets while we were using them and depreciating them. And then we didn't need to collect that money. And so that's how we built our call centers. Canada gave us $15 million to open 3 of them, because by that time we were hiring thousands of people. In a year, we had about 2,200 people. And of that, there's like a segment of the population that rotates really quickly. About high turnover of employees, but that's like 25% of your people are turning over at like 500%, 800%, while the rest are solid in there for years.
How do you react now when you get a call from a telemarketer?
When I left the business, I was one of the lead lobbyists in the industry against anti-telemarketing legislation, just to put that out there. And I put myself on the do not call list, the do not mail list, mark spam on all of the calls. I don't take them. And I also know that when you get a pause and somebody's not there, is the predictive dialing system not working? The last thing you want to do is hang up because it triggers the next call. It'll call you back in about 20 minutes because you hung it up. So it's better to wait and then say, take me off your list.
Did telemarketers always have scripts? Is that something that was there from the time you started, or did that evolve over time?
When we entered, they had scripts, and then they had the flip books and stuff that was all manual. We were automated, so our scripts were, as they went through the script, yes, no, maybe, and then it would change the dialogue. Nowadays, I understand it's been 20 years since I've been in the business, but they're using AI. It's prompting based upon the algorithm of how the customer or prospect is speaking, and it's giving a really custom response for the agent. And I'm hearing that even the agent could be AI as well. I just was at a meeting in which this group was showing me how they were doing. It was incredible. Large group facilitation, but before the team came into the meeting, they had an AI call each of the people, do an hour interview with each of them, and take those transcripts, compress them, find the intelligence that they were looking for, and feed it back to that group. And so they're basically doing the same thing in the call center world.
Is it unrealistic to think that companies calling on prospective clients would use AI then as a way to target the right clients? And then I guess in line with what you're saying, also develop maybe a custom script for certain classes of prospective clients?
Yes, and I was hearing Sam Altman talk about how the ways to secure your bank accounts and all of that information is really not secure if you think voice is the way. Because now with the deep fake, people can clone your voice, right? So if you could do that to break security, you could certainly do that to place a phone call with an AI. That caller sounds just like anybody you want them to sound like.
So right now you're doing CO2 coaching, and here it says that you're helping executives clear their minds, break through obstacles, and achieve extraordinary success. That's really cool. Can you tell us a success story of someone you worked with without saying their name?
This person was burned out. They were building an incredible software company and facing all the challenges, the people challenge that, hiring the wrong people, all of that. And first it was, how do I help that person find their time? How do I get them to get their time back? Because when people are burned out, it's usually because they don't have time and they haven't figured out how to move the work away from them, move to a leadership position versus a doer position. And often this is a transition entrepreneurs have a hard time making. They're so good at doing, they have a hard time giving it up. And so we moved him into that leader role, hired talented people around him, and talked about all the things he needed to know about developing that. Oh, there's so many pieces to the story, but he started doing strategic planning with our firm, and we built a plan. He said in one day he made $45 million more from that work that we did, which clearly didn't cost him $45 million to get there. He sold the company, I can't say for the numbers, but it's hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, all within 5 years of that meeting saying, I'm done. I'm burned out. Because at that point, he just tell me how I can get this thing sold. It was helping him find his own strength that he had, and then using that strength to help him find the time, organize his business in a way that makes sense to him and all the other employees and the great team that he surrounded himself with, and then created a way to position the company for somebody else to want it.
We're with Gary Cohen. He is the co-founder and managing partner of CO2 Coaching. Sounds like he's getting pretty good results so far. So kudos there. One of the things that we talked about was that the concept of how do I keep people on the hook versus putting me on the hook, right? So I think this dovetails nicely with your story about moving from an entrepreneur role to a leader role. But what are some of the techniques that an entrepreneur can practice to implement that?
I'm working on a book called On the Hook. And the idea, it's an allegory, and it talks about how somebody walks into your office, right? And says, this is what I'm going to do. And they're very excited. And they tell you, you ask all the questions you have to assure yourself that they actually know what they have in mind and that it's clear. But it's not to convince you. It's just to make sure they're clear-headed about what they want to do. Most management learning is you give them affirmation. Yeah, that sounds great. Oh, that's a great idea. However, it takes away the hook. It puts you on the hook and takes them off the hook. Why does that happen? Because as soon as you start giving them affirmation on something that hasn't actually accomplished anything yet, you're basically saying, I agree with you. And once you agree with them, you've become on the hook, because if it doesn't work out, they're coming back to you and they say, it didn't work, but you agreed that this was the right way to do it.
So
right?
let me ask you, what's the difference between that and giving authorization to move forward, right? So if somebody comes in and says, I've got this great idea, I say, yeah, it's a great idea, go for it. They're also asking permission to utilize the company resources, right, to work on this, and so they need that. So how do you kind of untangle those two ideas?
Yeah, thanks for that insight. It's true. And this is a place that leaders have a hard time, particularly at the beginning stages of entrepreneurship. What you find, though, is most companies have role and job descriptions for people. Those are the things that have already given that authority to that employee. And somehow it's overlooked by both parties, the boss and the employee. You don't need to give them permission. They have it. You granted it when you hired them, when you gave them the job description, when you gave them the roles of authority that they have in their role. So when they come in, they're actually looking for your permission. And what you don't want to do is give them that permission. You want to say, wow, you sound like you've thought this all through. You're really excited about it. And I'm looking forward to seeing how it all turns out. And they don't want to accept it because they know, they feel the tension that now is on them. But I thought, what would you do if you were in my place? Might be the comment. Well, it is not my place. I hired you to do this job. You're really talented and really smart, and I believe in you and I trust you. So I'm looking forward to seeing the results that you accomplish by executing on this. When they come back and it's done really well, you go, wow, that's fabulous. And think about it. In their heads, they're not thinking you gave them permission anymore. Now they can actually take in the appreciation of what you gave them. And I'm telling you, it's very hard for me to think of a company. I've coached within 300 companies over the last 20 years. It's very hard to find one that didn't have this issue. It's amazing how it's just insidious. Nobody's really labeled it in the management world. It just sits there and then they come up with all these fancy ways to trap people, as opposed to having them feel that sense of ownership and burden of what it means to feel like an owner of a business, which everybody on this call knows that feeling.
Well, that's a tough one, because I will say in Richard's law firm, I mean, sometimes I scream and yell at him that I want to do things my way, marketing. Anytime there's a problem, it's his fault. And everybody comes to him to solve it. And they don't bring solutions. They're just like, Richard, what are you going to do about this? And they complain.
I wouldn't quite put it that way. But I agree. I think, being able to instill a greater sense of responsibility in the team has got to be a positive thing. It's an interesting technique. And so you've tried this with your clients, and what kinds of results have you achieved?
Just fun. It's really fun. Well, at first, what I'll say is I'm writing the book because it takes so long to convince a client how to do it. meaning like it's simple. All of you probably get what I'm saying right now. Everybody on the show is listening. They go, oh, I get it. I get it. I get it. It's so quick, falls out of your head because it's so instinctual. I want to be positive. I get the kind of visceral high from giving advice. I'm a coach. I love advice giving. However, I know I'm a coach and I'm not leading the person. I'm in a instructive teaching coaching role. And that's very different than a leadership role. And so what I found was over a course of a year, people will make this adjustment. And before long, they have so much time on their hands because what happens is people no longer come in for permission because they clearly know they're not going to get it. And so all those people who are lining up at your door aren't at your door anymore. They're just doing the work and they're owning it, and you're starting to see the results. And we see that in most all of our clients, and they eventually get it. Trick is, how do you get it quicker? How do you really realize that when you're pointing the finger about why are they always coming to me? It's because you keep giving the advice. You keep wanting to answer the question. The simple, silly one is somebody comes into your office and says, hey, I can't figure out how to use this printer. And you're like, really? That's why you're coming to see the CEO of the business? You can't, and you do know how to fix it, by the way, as the CEO, because you had to do it at some point, especially if you're starting small. But instead you say, where else might you find that? And they go, well, I could ask ChatGPT. Next time you don't have to bring that to me. It's just a silly example, but it's like there are so many places where people can find the answer other than you. And they're responsible for it. So make them responsible. Have them feel the hook, the tension, the ownership.
I have followed that track for sure. So I do, if somebody comes in with an issue, I will say, well, how would you solve this? You have to resist the temptation to jump on the bandwagon because you know the answer. Telling them makes you feel smart, but then it also means that you assume ownership for it. And I can see how that would be ultimately destructive.
And there again, ChatGPT, that's where everybody should go. Somebody asked me one during the meetup last night. I said, well, why don't you ask ChatGPT? So anyway, thank you, Gary. That was really a great story and great advice. Gary, how do people find you?
CO2Coaching.com. They can type in Gary B Cohen. That'll get them to me. Although they might find a baseball player who has the same name.